I am Jasmine, 32 years old, working in Denver. Last Christmas, after months of sending money regularly to my mother to support the family in Oregon, I decided to drive home. I believed that money was helping my father with his medicine, helping my younger brother and sister with expenses, and keeping our small home from falling into hardship. I hadn't planned it in advance. In the middle of year-end stress and the heavy weight of homesickness, I only knew I had to return. Winter nights in Oregon were harsher than I remembered. Ice covered the road, freezing rain clung to the windshield, forcing me to slow down. The tires of the rental SUV from the airport crunched over the familiar gravel road, the sound stirring up a flood of childhood memories. Back then, every holiday season my father, Patrick, would string blinking lights across the porch. My mother, Gloria, always insisted we eat sugar cookies so sweet they made us gag. My brother Jacob would haul the Christmas tree inside, while my sister Rachel argued with me endlessly about where to hang the ornaments. Those things used to be traditions. But that night when I stopped in front of the old house, not a single light shone, no music played, and not a single car was parked in the driveway. My heart sank. The house looked abandoned, as if forgotten for weeks. I turned off the engine, stepped out, the cold slapping my face until it burned. In the suffocating silence, I dragged my suitcase toward the door. Knocked 3 times. No answer. I pressed the doorbell, but the familiar time never came. I knocked harder, the hollow echo thudding back against my chest. A wave of unease rose inside me. I turned toward the empty yard, wondering if something serious had happened. Then, from the end of the street, a familiar figure appeared. Mrs. Rogers, the elderly neighbor nearing 70. She wore a worn coat, carrying grocery bags. She stopped when she saw me, her eyes uncertain. "Jasmine? You've come back," her voice trembled. I rushed over, asking urgently, "Do you know where my family is? Why is the house so empty?" She avoided my eyes, looking off into the distance. "Gloria took the kids to Hawaii for Christmas vacation." I froze, the ground shifting beneath me. "Hawaii? What?" "I sent money for my father." My voice broke. "Where is my father?" Mrs. Rogers bit her lip, hesitated, then finally said, "Patrick is at County General Hospital. He's been there for a while." Her words struck straight through me. No shouting, no drama, just cold enough to pierce to the bone. I didn't ask anything more. I understood. They had left him behind, taken the money I sent, and gone to enjoy the sun while he lay there, alone. My suitcase slipped from my hand, hitting the wooden porch with a hollow thud. I turned away, ignoring Mrs. Rogers's pitying eyes. Back in the car, my hands shook so badly I struggled to start the engine. The road to the hospital was usually long, but that night it felt suffocatingly short. The image of the dark, empty house shrank in the rearview mirror. I bit my lip hard, tears streaming, but I refused to make a sound. Only one question filled my mind. How long had my father been there alone? I rushed straight to County General, my heart pounding as if it might tear through my chest. The hospital's neon sign, blurred in the freezing rain, sent a chill down my spine. This place was old, a county hospital for the poor, and I knew my father would never have wanted to end up here. He was a man of pride who had spent his whole life in a small woodshop, never asking anyone for anything. Yet now he lay in a run-down facility while my mother and my 2 siblings basked under the Hawaiian sun, using the money I had worked so hard to send home. I pushed open the glass doors. The air reeked of disinfectant and exhaustion. At the front desk sat a young nurse, eyes glued to her computer screen. My voice trembled as I spoke. "My father, Patrick Miller. He was admitted here." She tapped on her keyboard, then looked up with a flat expression. "Ward 4. No family visitors for almost 2 weeks." 2 weeks. The words sliced into me like a knife. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the fury rising inside. My feet carried me down the long hallway, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. The squeak of rubber soles against the tile echoed in the sterile silence, so cold I felt like I had wandered into a world where family didn't exist. When I opened the hospital room door, I froze. The man lying on the stark white bed barely resembled the strong father I had once known. He was gaunt, his cheeks hollow, his skin yellowed. An oxygen tube draped across his face, and his bony hand twitched weakly as if trying to hold on to something. I walked closer, sank into a metal chair, and took his hand in mine. That same hand had once guided me across the schoolyard, had steadied me when I learned to ride a bike. Now it was icy cold, fragile, making me want to cry on the spot. "Dad," I whispered. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy pupils struggling to recognize me. His voice rasped, carried away like a breath on the wind. "Jazzy, you came back." I nodded quickly, choking back tears, and gripped his hand tighter. But only minutes later he drifted back to sleep. I looked around the room. It was empty, no get-well cards, no flowers, not a trace of family ever being there. The truth was laid bare before me. They had abandoned him and they had lied to me just to take my money. I stepped into the hallway, my phone vibrating non-stop in my hand. Messages from my mother, from Rachel, from Jacob. "Don't worry about Dad, he's fine. We need money urgently this time, please send more. Dad doesn't want to bother you." The words, once convincing, now read like cruel jokes. That same day Mrs. Rogers called, her voice heavy with pity. "Jasmine, they're not coming back, sweetheart. Since Patrick was admitted, no one has visited. Only doctors and nurses have been there. I feel so sorry for him, but what else could I do?" My throat tightened as I gripped the phone. I thanked her quietly, then made my decision in that moment. I would not let my father spend another day in that cold, neglected place. That very night I demanded transfer papers. The nurse looked shocked. "Are you sure? Mary's in Portland is very expensive." I stared straight into her eyes, my voice firm. "I'll pay. Prepare it now." 2 hours later, the ambulance rumbled down snow-covered roads with my father inside. I sat beside him, refusing to let go of his hand. Every beep of the monitor felt like a countdown of the time I had left with him. Through the fogged window, the city glowed faintly in the night. Inside me, only one resolution remained. They would never know about this, and they would never get another chance to exploit us again. My father stirred, opening his eyes halfway, his breath shallow. "Sweetheart, stop carrying it all," he whispered. I leaned down, fighting tears, and whispered back against his ear, "Don't worry, Dad. I'll take care of it. But this time no one will ever hurt you again." That night, when the stretcher was rolled into a private room at St. Mary's, I stood by and watched as he was tucked into clean sheets, surrounded by a team of attentive doctors. No more damp, cold room. No more neglect. I stood still, tears streaking down my face, but inside my heart hardened with resolve. The private room at St. Mary's was brighter, larger, and far cleaner than the old place. But seeing my father lying there, frail like a shadow, the light only made the painful truth more visible. He had been abandoned. I pulled a chair close to his bed, holding his withered hand. That same hand, once rough from years of labor, was now only skin and bone, so cold and light I feared it might slip away from mine at any moment. The steady beeping of the monitor blended with his labored breathing. I sat frozen, memories of past Christmases flooding my mind. I remembered being 8 years old, the Oregon cold biting at our skin, yet my father still strung lights around the porch in the pouring rain, patiently connecting each tiny bulb so we could have a complete holiday. He sang Christmas songs off-key, making Jacob and me laugh until we rolled on the porch steps. Rachel sat wrapped in a blanket, yelling that the lights were crooked, and Dad just laughed and fixed them. Those moments had once been home. Now it was only me, sitting in a sterile white room watching him fade away. I remembered the smell of sugar cookies my mother used to bake. Even though the three of us complained they were far too sweet, we still ate them to make her happy. Back then I believed that was love. I thought our family, though not wealthy, would always have each other. Yet this year they were in Hawaii sipping cocktails, posting pictures with wide smiles, while my father gasped for air here. What hurt most was knowing that their paradise vacation had been paid for with the money I sent, money I truly believed was for his medicine. I pulled out my phone, the screen lit with countless unread messages. The same tired lines: "We need more money for tuition. Mom says the hospital needs another payment, please send more. Dad's fine, don't worry." Those words made my skin crawl. I had believed them time after time, only to sit here now, witnessing my father treated like something left behind. I looked up at him, my chest aching. This man had shielded our family from every storm. He woke at 5 a.m. working in the woodshop until late at night just so we could have enough to get by. His hands bled sometimes, but he still smiled and said, "As long as you kids are okay, that's all that matters." And when he grew weak, the very people he had protected turned their backs. My throat closed tight. I wanted to scream, to call my mother and siblings and hurl the ugly truth in their faces. But when my finger hovered over the call icon, I dropped it. They weren't worthy. If I let them in now, they would only bring more lies, more hollow excuses. My father didn't need that. He needed peace. He needed my hand here, not empty promises. Night fell, snow thudded against the window, the city lights bleeding yellow across the glass. I rested my head against the chair, watching him drift in and out of shallow sleep. Inside me, grief and fury tangled like an underground current. I didn't just pity him, I was ashamed of myself. Ashamed for being blind, for letting them drain my hard-earned money while he lay neglected. I studied his pale face and wondered, did he know the truth? Maybe he had tried to call me only to be stopped. Maybe he knew they were using my money elsewhere but was too weak to speak. The thought made my heart seize. I bent low and whispered like a vow, I promise, Dad, you will never be left behind again. I'll stay with you to the end. The sound of snow tapping against the glass mingled with the beeping of his heart monitor. I sat by his side, memory and reality bleeding together, cutting deeper than any wound. The more I looked at him, the more I saw the distance between family and blood. Sometimes the ones who share your name are the biggest strangers of all. And in that moment I understood. What I had lost wasn't just money, it was trust. And once trust breaks, it never truly mends. I squeezed his hand tighter, closed my eyes, letting silent tears fall. Outside, I knew Gloria, Jacob, and Rachel were laughing, raising their glasses under a tropical sun. They had no idea that here, in a cold hospital room, the man who had been the backbone of our family was slipping away. And I, the daughter they once treated as an endless wallet, was the one left to see it all. The phone in my coat pocket buzzed nonstop. I had ignored it for hours but finally pulled it out. A flood of messages from my mother and Rachel filled the screen. The words flashing before my eyes felt like slaps across the face. You always blow everything out of proportion. Your dad doesn't want to be a burden. My mother wrote. Rachel was sharper. You always love playing the savior. Acting like you're the only one who cares about this family. Do you think you're so great? I gripped the phone tightly, my breathing ragged. My father lay motionless before me, while they sent messages blaming me, twisting everything into my fault for carrying too much. Shameless. For years I had worked myself to exhaustion, sending every paycheck so they could live comfortably. I had stayed quiet, endured it all, but now no more. Before I could respond, a call came in from Mrs. Rogers. Her voice was hoarse from the cold. Jasmine, I need to tell you this. Gloria told the neighbors that Patrick didn't want to go anywhere. She said he chose to stay behind, that he liked the peace and quiet. Everyone believed it, but I know for a fact Patrick never said that. He wanted to be with his family, with his children. I froze. So it wasn't just abandonment. They had built a lie to cover their cruelty. To the neighbors, my father must have looked like this stubborn old man who hated traveling, while my mother and siblings wore the mask of being dutiful. I bit my lip until it bled. Never had I felt blood ties could be so ruthless. I turned to the hospital bed. My father still lay unconscious, his chest rising and falling weakly. I held his hand tighter, forcing my voice steady. Dad, I know everything now. They lied. But I won't let you slip away in silence. That night, I scrolled through Rachel's social media. Photos of her beaming on Waikiki Beach, holding up a fancy cocktail with the caption, "Family time finally." Next to her, Jacob posed by a rented Jeep, while my mother stood in a floral dress and wide-brimmed hat, her smile smug and satisfied. Family time. My stomach churned. What family? While the man who carried their lives on his back lay here, gasping, they dressed up their betrayal with a slogan to flaunt. A cold fury surged through me. I opened my bank account on my laptop, scrolling through transactions. Each transfer popped up. $1,200 for Rachel's tuition, $800 for Jacob's insurance, $1,500 for urgent hospital fees. I had believed them all. But the truth was clear now. The money had bought plane tickets, resort bookings, and luxury rentals. I sat in silence for a long while, listening to the weak beep of my father's heart monitor. That frail rhythm was the only thread keeping me from collapsing. I saw it clearly now. This wasn't about money anymore. This was betrayal. The phone screen lit again. Why aren't you answering? Dad is just making excuses, he's not even lucid. Mom's right, he wanted peace and quiet. Stop making it a big deal. Rachel wrote. My hands shook with rage. For the first time, I didn't feel sadness reading my sister's words. Only disgust. My mother chimed in. Jasmine, if you truly loved your father, you'd believe me. I know better than you. He wouldn't want you to neglect your work just to sit there. I placed the phone face down on the table, my eyes fixed on my father. His brow furrowed even in restless sleep, as if he were still fighting battles in his dreams. In that moment I understood, I would never let them decide for him again. I was the one here. I was the one witnessing each fragile breath. Outside, the snow fell heavier, burying even the glow of the street lamps. I felt trapped in a cold box where the truth lay bare. Yet at the same time I sensed a fire rising inside me. Their betrayal had ended my silence. I turned back to my father, clutching his hand firmly, whispering, Dad, I'll be here. They can lie to the world, but they won't lie to me again. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by his bed, listening to the steady hum of the machines, the snow tapping against the window. And inside, one decision took root. From this moment on, I would no longer be their endless wallet. I would protect my father, and I would protect myself. The night at St. Mary's stretched endlessly, broken only by the steady beeping of the monitor. I sat beside the bed, my eyes blurred with exhaustion, yet my hand never let go of my father's. Suddenly those bony fingers twitched, trembling. I jerked my head up. His eyes cracked open, clouded but still carrying the warmth I knew so well. His voice was hoarse like a whisper in the wind. Jasmine, sweetheart, I don't want you to carry so much anymore. My heart clenched. I bent closer, whispering, Dad, don't say that. I do this for you. If not me, who would be here with you? He struggled to draw a breath, his chest rising and falling painfully. I know you've given too much. I don't want you to sacrifice anymore. Tears slid down my cheeks, dropping onto his hand. Memories crashed into me. Dad carrying me on his shoulders at the fair, teaching me to hammer my first nail, waiting on the porch for me after school. His life had been nothing but giving, never asking. And now, even at the end, he was thinking of me. Dad, I'm sorry. I should have seen the truth sooner. I should have stopped you from suffering alone. My voice cracked, my trembling hand pressed against his chest. He tried to smile, faint, fragile, but it shattered me completely. The silence stretched. The monitor's rhythm slowed. I gripped his hand tighter, panicked. Dad, don't leave me. Please hold on just a little longer. His eyes closed, his lips barely moving, almost soundless. I'm proud of you. Those words cut like a knife but burned like a flame. The pain ripped through me, yet at the same time, it was the final warmth he gave. I pressed my face into his frail hand, sobbing silently. When I lifted my head, the monitor's line fell slower, and then a long, unbroken beep. No more heartbeat. I screamed inside, but no sound came. No nurse rushed in, no one witnessed it. Only him and me in a stark white room, bearing the moment of his final breath. In the blur of shock, my eyes fell on his left hand. On his ring finger, his faded wedding band glimmered under the sterile light. I remembered it vividly. As a child, I used to twist it around his finger and he'd laugh, saying, Don't loosen it, this is the most precious thing I own. His hand was already cold. Trembling, I slid the ring off. The icy metal against my skin froze me to the core. I pressed it against my chest, over my aching heart, whispering, I'll keep it, Dad. I'll protect it for you. It was only later I noticed my pillow was soaked with tears. The room was so silent I could hear my own breathing. My voice was nearly gone as I called for the nurse. They came in, glanced at him, then gave a small nod. One placed a hand on my shoulder gently, saying, He went peacefully. You being here, that's what mattered most. I didn't answer. Only one thought spun in my head. My mother, Jacob, Rachel, had stolen their last chance. They chose sunlight and staged smiles while Dad slipped away quietly. And I, the daughter they once treated like a walking wallet, was the only one holding his hand at the very end. When the staff pulled a white sheet over him, I stood, my fist still closed tightly around the ring. In that moment I realized, this wasn't just a keepsake. It was living proof of real love, a kind they would never understand. I stepped into the hallway, the world outside feeling like it had shifted colors. Neon lights flickered against pale tile floors. The hospital intercom droned with soulless numbers. I looked down at my hand at the tiny ring resting there and I knew. A chapter of my life had closed. But another had opened. One where I would never again allow anyone to trample my trust. My father's funeral took place on a bleak January morning, the wind slicing through skin. The cemetery on the outskirts of Portland was covered in white snow, attended only by a few close neighbors and some of his old co-workers. No mother, no Jacob, no Rachel. I sat silently before his portrait, feeling a chill colder than the weather itself. The man who carried our family his whole life was laid to rest in solitude, while the ones who shared his name were absent as if none of it mattered. After the service, I returned to my small apartment in Denver. In the first days, the silence was so heavy I could hear each tick of the clock. I hung my father's wedding band on a chain, keeping it against my chest as a reminder that the truth could never be erased. I tried to work, tried to live as normal, but every night I jolted awake, haunted by the memory of the monitor's flatline in that hospital room. A week later, as I stepped out of the shower, I heard pounding at my door. I hesitated, peered through the peephole, and my stomach tightened. Outside stood my mother, Gloria, wrapped in her luxurious fur coat, makeup smeared by fake tears. Beside her, Rachel's face was tight with arrogance, lips pressed thin. Behind them, Jacob leaned on the railing, hands shoved in his pockets, avoiding my gaze. I leaned my forehead against the cold doorframe, refusing to open. My mother's hoarse voice carried through, "Jasmine, open the door, please. We need to talk." I closed my eyes, clutching the chain on my chest. Oh, I didn't need another performance. Rachel cut in sharply. "Are you going to stay silent forever? Dad's gone, can't you see the family needs to be together right now?" A hollow laugh escaped me, though I remained silent. Outside, their knocking continued, each thud striking like a hammer on my memories. "Jasmine," my mother sobbed, "I know you're angry, but we're still family. Don't push this too far." In the empty apartment, I whispered, "Family? Where were you when he needed you?" The pounding lasted nearly an hour. Finally, they stopped. I stood still, leaning against the wall, listening as their footsteps faded down the hall. My heart no longer hurt, only a cold clarity remained. They hadn't come for Dad and certainly not for me. They came because they'd lost their living bank. That night, messages poured in. "We shouldn't be apart like this, Jasmine. You owe us at least an explanation. Rachel. We all lost the same father." The screen kept glowing, but I flipped the phone face down on the table. I didn't reply. Not a single word. One question gnawed at me: why now? Why only after everything was gone did they knock on my door? Not for love of Dad, not for me, but because they knew the truth. The money flow had dried up. Their pleas weren't for reconciliation, but for the lifeline they had grown dependent on. I pulled back the curtain, staring at the city lights shining faintly over the snow. My hand clenched around my father's ring. I whispered, "Dad, I won't let them deceive us again." The next day I went back to work, burying myself in tasks. But by evening, more missed calls piled up. They even left dramatic voicemails. "Jasmine, you'll regret shutting out your family. You're selfish. Don't you see how much pain Mom is in? Don't turn yourself into a stranger." I played them on speaker, listened to every word, then erased them all. Because I knew the truth. In their eyes, I was never a daughter or a sister. I was a walking ATM. And now that the machine had stopped dispensing, they came running, pretending to care. That night, I sat alone by the window, watching the snow fall endlessly. My heart was cold, but no longer trembling. I had woken up. I knew I had to prepare for something greater. A face-to-face reckoning to end the toxic cycle they had built once and for all. That morning, the Oregon sky was heavy and gray, clouds pressing down like they might crush the earth. I arrived at the cemetery nearly an hour before the agreed time. My father's grave rested beneath an old oak, snow blanketing the grass around it. The stone was new, carved with simple words. Patrick Miller. A father, a friend, a hardworking man. I sat down, laid my hand on the cold stone. His wedding band trembled softly against the chain around my neck. I whispered, "Dad, today I'll speak for you. I won't let them keep pretending." The crunch of footsteps in the snow came from behind. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. My mother's voice, Gloria, wavered yet still forced. "Jasmine, we just want to talk." I stood, turning to face them. She wore her expensive fur coat, makeup still caked on though her face was pale. Rachel crossed her arms, eyes darting away like she'd been dragged here against her will. Jacob trailed behind, hands shoved in his pockets, head bowed. I pointed to the stone. That man was family. And you? You abandoned him, used the money I sent for the hospital to go to Hawaii. Tell me, what excuse could you possibly have? Rachel snapped back sharp. You always act like some saint. You don't understand everything. I pulled 3 envelopes from my coat and tossed them into the snow at their feet. The bank records showed every transfer. $500, $2,000, stretching across years. On each, a short note in my handwriting. I'm done paying for your silence. Jacob's head shot up, his face pale. Jasmine. But I raised a hand to cut him off. I don't want to hear a single word. I know everything. Mom lied to the neighbors, told them Dad didn't want to go anywhere, that he liked staying home. But the truth? He was in the hospital facing death alone. And you chose a vacation while I played the fool, funding all of it. My mother stepped forward, eyes red. I'm sorry, Jasmine. But you have to understand, it wasn't that simple. I looked her dead in the eyes, voice like ice. No. It was very simple. It was selfishness. You cared only about yourselves, your pleasures, your pockets. Dad didn't die just from illness, he died abandoned. And you'll live with that truth. No one spoke. The wind howled harder, flinging snow into our faces. Rachel glanced down at the papers, her lips trembling, but no words came. Jacob pulled his hands free, his eyes wet as if he might cry, but I turned away. Drawing a long breath, I touched the wedding band on my chain. I forgive. But not for you. I forgive myself. For believing, for being blind. From now on, I'm not your financial crutch, not your bottomless wallet. This ends here. My mother froze, disbelief flooding her voice. Jasmine, you can't abandon family. I turned, my gaze sharp as steel. Family? The man beneath that stone was family. You're just blood. Nothing more. The air fell silent, broken only by the whistling wind through the trees. I pressed my hand to my father's grave, whispering, Dad, I've finished. Then I straightened, turned, and walked away. Behind me, my mother screamed, Jasmine, you can't leave us. Rachel shouted, you'll regret this. Jacob murmured something that sounded like a plea. But I didn't turn back. Each step crunched through deep snow, and with every step I felt lighter. Not because the anger vanished, but because for the first time I was free from their cycle of lies. I knew the road ahead would be hard, but at least from this day I no longer wore the chains of a toxic family. My father's ring pressed cold against my chest, steady as stone. I whispered to myself, I've chosen. And I will never go back. In the days after that confrontation at the cemetery, my life slipped into a strange quiet. The phone still buzzed, messages from Mom, Rachel, and Jacob still poured in, but I kept it on silent and placed it face down on the table. At first, my small apartment in Denver felt like a hollow space swallowing me whole. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock grew so loud it nearly drove me mad. But slowly, the silence became something soothing. No more begging for money, no more frantic calls demanding I wire cash, no more blame for carrying too much. Each morning, I brewed coffee and set the mug by the window. Outside, the snow melted little by little, revealing patches of wet green grass. I touched my father's wedding band hanging on the chain against my chest, the metal cool against my skin. Before, I wore it like a shield against betrayal, a reminder to stay guarded. But one day I slipped it off the chain and onto my finger. It fit loosely, spinning around the knuckle, but to me it no longer meant defense. It meant choice. I chose to keep him with me, not to fight the world but to keep walking forward. I started focusing on small things. In the evenings, I stopped grabbing takeout and began cooking for myself. Simple meals with fresh vegetables I picked up at the store. I planted a small pot of green on my windowsill, watering it every morning, watching it stretch upward like a piece of me learning to grow again. I began journaling, pages that didn't need anyone's approval, only my honesty staring back. Peace came not from being alone but from people I never expected. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly neighbor downstairs, nearly 70, often knocked on my door with baked goods she'd made, asking, "Are you doing okay, dear?" For the first time I shared a little about my dad, how he loved Christmas lights, how he adored the scent of freshly cut wood. She listened without interruption, without judgment. That warmth was what I once longed for from blood family, yet it came instead from someone unrelated by name. At work, I began opening up too. When a colleague spoke about losing her father to cancer, I didn't give advice. I just sat beside her, silent until her tears slowed, then quietly said, "I understand. I'm here." That simple sentence made her squeeze my hand tightly. For the first time, I realized presence can be more powerful than words. I also learned forgiveness, but not for Mom, Rachel, or Jacob. I forgave myself for believing too long, for sending away too much without questions, for letting Dad suffer in silence. Forgiving myself wasn't easy. But one morning, as sunlight streamed through the window, I laid my hand over his ring and whispered, "I did my best. And I still have a future to live." In that moment, the weight lifted as if I had finally shed years of burden. I no longer sought validation from those who betrayed me. Mom could keep sending texts, Rachel could keep blaming, Jacob could play the victim, but none of them held power over me anymore. My silence wasn't fear. It was closure. They might call me cold, but the truth was I was simply learning to live my own life. One late afternoon, I visited the cemetery again. The snow had melted, green grass spread across the ground. I placed a small stone beneath the oak tree, not for grief but for gratitude. I whispered, "Dad, I kept my promise. I chose myself and I'm still moving forward." The wind rustled through the branches, sounding like a quiet reply. When I left, I didn't cry. I smiled faintly, a smile carrying warmth at last. I knew I hadn't lost everything. I had lost a false family, but I had found myself. I still had memories of my father, the kindness of ordinary people who stood by me, and the new strength to rewrite my life. That evening, I sat on my apartment balcony sipping coffee. The spring sky was clear, the breeze carried the scent of damp earth. I looked at the ring glinting under the golden light, and it no longer felt heavy. It was no longer a chain, but a gentle reminder. I had chosen. And I would never let anyone take that freedom away again. Jasmine's story reflects a bitter reality that still exists in life. Many who claim the title of family are willing to abandon or even exploit their own blood for selfish gain. Yet her journey is also a reminder that we can break free from toxic bonds to find true peace. Family is not defined by blood alone, but by presence and genuine love. Most importantly, forgiving yourself is the key to beginning a new life. What do you think about Jasmine's journey and her decision to cut ties with her family to reclaim her freedom? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful and meaningful family stories.